to another complicated situation that really is not appearing very much in the news. You're going to tell us about.
Right. So this is regarding the Syro-Malabar Church. And a note for our listeners, because some of our listeners might not be familiar with this, but when we speak of the one holy Catholic Apostolic Church, we are actually talking about many different churches with their own liturgical customs that are dating back to the apostles, that are united together under the Bishop of Rome, the Supreme Pontiff. And of course, most people are in the Latin Rite. You might be familiar with some people who are in the Eastern rites, like the Byzantine Rite. This is one of those churches. There has been a problem recently with some of the liturgical choices made by some of the priests, and there's a possibility for excommunicating those priests. So before we get into that, I want to talk about the history of the Syro-Malabar Church, because we do need to understand how we got to this point. I mentioned at the beginning of the show St. Thomas, who evangelized to the Indians over there. And due to the geographic distance between India and Rome, they were outside of communion with Rome, or even knowledge of Rome, for quite a long time. We call those the St. Thomas Christians, similar to how Japan was left detached without any priests. This changed when Nestorius, who was a heretical, schismatical bishop, set up what's called the Assyrian Church of the East, or the Nestorian Church, as it's called. The St. Thomas Christians then fell under the jurisdiction of the Nestorian Church, and they developed a liturgy from the Nestorians, and also mixing it with their old customs. When the European colonizers arrived and the Portuguese took over, they noticed there were some problems, and that should be evident. You have a group of Christians that are run by the Nestorians, and the liturgy was kind of confused in a way. There wasn't even a clear choice of liturgical vestments. And so in 1599, the Portuguese made the decision to suppress any Nestorianism was going on there, any Nestorian influence, and Latinize the Indians. And when you hear that, that's heard with a sense of terror among many people. But Latinizing at the time meant just, we're going to incorporate some Roman some customs from the Roman Church. In 1653, a group of priests and bishops split off, and they joined the Oriental Orthodox and the Eastern Orthodox churches. That's in what's called the Coonan Cross Oath, and they left the Catholic Church. The Christians that remained within the Catholic Church became what's known as the Syro-Malabar Church. The Syro-Malabar Church. They were loyal to Rome. So they were heavily Latinized in a liturgy that was either just completely just the Latin Rite, or very influenced by it. And in in the early 20th century, we started seeing a stop to that. We started wanting to go back to the old form of the Eastern liturgy. Pope Pius XI asked the Latinizations to stop, and Pope Pius XII formally requested all of them to use what are basically canons, what are called anaphora. This was formalized with the Second Vatican Council, and when they said, you need to stop the Latinizations, go back to your earlier form of rituals. I want to mention this. There is some problematic issues with the original forms that traditionalists, I think, rightly should raise. One is being their traditional Eastern liturgy, which is called the anaphora of Adai and Marie, I believe it's called, does not have words of consecration. That's a big problem, and that was addressed in the by the CDF, which they basically just kind of hand waved it, saying it's implicit in the liturgy. I think there's problems there. But what happened after Vatican II? Well, rather than Latinizing they took a step away from Latinizing by praying the rosary or having the Stations of the Cross. Instead, what we saw is there was a movement of priests who wanted to follow the Novus Ordo reforms that were done in the Latin Rite and apply it to the Syro-Malabar. That's been going on for a long time. We've seen that they were facing the people rather than traditionally facing east, where there used to be a curtain that separated the people and the priests.
And I think, did we have an image you were going to show us of
I can
one of their rites that might help people picture this?
Yeah. So let me share my screen here. So this might help people. There's been a sort of mix, and let me get this up real quick. 1 second here. Put this up. There's been a mix. There we go. Share. There we go. So as you see here, this can show you the sort of problem that the Syro-Malabar have been going through. Out front, you see this table, and this is familiar to Latin Rite Catholics, right? They've been sort of in the middle of saying, well, you have these priests who are saying we need to follow the Novus Ordo revisions of the Latin Rite and apply it to ours, which is facing the people. Here we have a priest facing east, which is traditionally done in the East Syriac rite that the Syro-Malabar follow. So that's been a problem. It's sort of been in a standstill. We've got some people sort of pointing their guns at each other, saying what's going to happen. And recently, it's been rumored, and it seems to be very likely from the different reports and because this gets heated in India as well. You've got some pretty tough words being shared. It's likely that the priests who were following the Novus Ordo sort of revisions of the Syro-Malabar liturgy are going to be excommunicated. That's what it's looking like is going to happen. And one of the reasons we wanted to bring this up is that's very odd, because the same reasons that Pope Francis is excommunicating these men for wanting to follow Vatican II, the liturgical reform, their reasons for reforming the Syro-Malabar rite are the same reasons that Pope Francis and the post-Vatican II Conciliar Church has been having for reforming the Latin rite. So we sort of have a contradiction. Why should the Eastern Church be able to have their traditional liturgy, but not the Roman rite? So that there's a lot to the Syro-Malabar situation. It's very complicated, as I mentioned. I don't think it's not great just to go back to the original Nestorian forms. One of their anaphora was even written by Nestorius, but it's also, of course, not good to go to this Novus Ordo like situation that some of these priests were doing in the Syro-Malabar Church. I don't know if you had anything to add, Brian.
No, it is odd. I think my only explanation is something I asked Bishop Fillet once. How do you understand some of these contradictions in what Pope Francis does? Because like on a logical level, this seems to make no sense, right? In the Traditionis Custodes, he's like, get on board with Vatican II, then to the Indians, stop. And he just said, the problem is you're thinking logically. That's what Bishop Fillet said to me. He said, he is not a person, Pope Francis, Jorge Bergoglio, even before he was Pope, who thinks logically and consistently. That's not the way he thinks. He does not think according to principles. And so to him, it's according to emotions, to political calculations, to how he feels about people. And he doesn't have any tension if those considerations lead him to what would be logical inconsistencies, because it's just, he doesn't care about them, which is why it's interesting. Right. He explained to me, because people say, why is he so tolerant of the Society of St. Pius X? Like, why isn't he gunning for them? And he says, because he doesn't really care about our doctrinal positions. It's not like for Benedict XVI, for John Paul II, it was a big deal, but he doesn't really care about that. We can sort of see that in the DDF document, right? It doesn't really matter about doctrine, just do. And he's like, he likes what we do. We do stuff. We go out and we're busy. And it's just sort of, Bishop Fillet says, to you and I, he's speaking to me, like, that makes no sense to us, but that is, we're just dealing with the mystery of, that's the way he works. And I think that this is just sort of another highlight of that point.
Yeah. And I will mention one more thing here. It's that, Vatican II did have a decree talking about removing the Latinizations, and that could be the impetus behind it. But now we see though that there's an internal contradiction in this mode of thinking, saying that it's great for the East to have this connection with tradition, but for Rome, just because of the modern world, we need to have the Latin Rite completely reformed. There is a contradictory spirit here. People have to look out for it, and it's going to be strange to see who is excommunicated, who's not, because under Pope Francis' way of thinking, either one, and it would make the same not amount of sense. So it's
very true.